This is where you can find peace and happiness within you. Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control and some things are not. By Epictetus. This is a great quote that I love reading, and it's very much the idea, the definition of where peace and happiness lives within us. Now, I'm going to give you guys 3 points on how that's the case. But before I do, I want to go into a quick story of how I came across this and how I was struggling with finding peace and happiness within myself. So one day I had a business call and I was on that call and things didn't go as well as I planned. And as a result, I was frustrated that morning. So as I was getting in the shower, as I was getting ready to go to work and all that other stuff, I was using all the techniques that I typically give all of my other clients. And as I was using the techniques and I was in my car and I was driving, I was like, why am I still so angry? Why am I still so frustrated? It's like I've used 5 techniques already. It's been about 30 minutes, but yet I'm still frustrated. What's going on? Am I doing them wrong? Do I need new techniques, different techniques, better techniques? All these things were going through my mind. But then it hit me. I was using these techniques in the wrong way. And what I mean by that was that I was hoping for something that wasn't supposed to be the purpose of these techniques. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I was using these techniques to try to make anger and frustration go away. And that's not what we're supposed to do when we use techniques within acceptance and commitment therapy. What we're supposed to do is use these techniques to give us the strength to be with this emotion until it decides to leave on its own. When we're doing that, it gives us the ability to act when that emotion is present. So it's kind of like when it's raining. When it's raining, you don't say, you know what, I'm not going to drive to work. Or if you have a flight that day and it's raining, I know for sure that you are not canceling your flight just because it's raining. You still find a way to get in the car or get in the Uber and go to that flight. And it's the same thing when it comes to our anger, our pain, shame, guilt, sadness, anxiety, whatever it is. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is how do you find that peace and happiness within you? And here's the thing, peace and happiness, and this is my first point, it lives within that space between your mind and yourself. Okay, I'll say that again. Peace and happiness, it lives within that space between you and your mind. The more connected you are to your thoughts, the more your thoughts tend to have control over you. If you believe everything that you think, trust me when I say that you will have a very, very poor belief system. You may take actions that you will later tend to regret. There's so many things that will come at a cost because you're believing and you're so connected to everything that your mind is saying. Now, is the mind a bad thing? Is it a bad person? No, it's not. It's very natural for it to try to protect you. And again, it will tell you every nasty thing that it can to get you to comply with what they think is in your best interest. So what we want to do is we want to put space between these things. It's kind of like this. I want you to have this image in your mind. Imagine if I was 6 inches away from your face and I screamed at the top of my lungs. That would probably shake you up a little bit. You'll probably, maybe jump a little bit, be a little startled, right? But if I yelled if I yelled at you, for let's say 600 yards away, so 6 football fields, and I yelled at you from the top of my lungs, would you have that same effect, all right? Would you have that same reaction as if you did when I was just 6 inches from your face? And the answer would be no. And the reason why is because there's a lot of space between you and me at that time. And that's what we want to do. We want to put space between you and your mind so that when your mind is telling you all these things, you don't have to be so startled by everything that it says. You don't have to give your attention to every negative thing, every bad outcome that could happen, right? You don't have to put all your focus onto those things. And that's where the peace and the happiness lives. Because when I realize that my mind can say whatever it wants, and I can decide whether or not I want to believe it, whether or not I want to focus on it, it then gives me the freedom to then decide, what do I want to do next? Who do I want to believe? Do I want to believe me, or do I want to believe my mind? That is the option that we have each and every day. But if we're not careful, if we haven't practiced things like mindfulness, then we will take action on everything that the mind says, for good or for worse. And that's not the type of relationship that we want to have with our mind, because at that point, you become a slave to your own mind. And for a lot of people, that's how they feel. Whenever depression, anxiety, their past traumas, when these things come up, their addictions, right? When these things come up, they feel as though they have to give all of their focus to those things. They have to bow down to those emotions. They have to bow down to those thoughts. And that is not the case. And that's why we want to practice placing distance between you and your mind. Now, how do you do that? Well, to create this space between you and your mind, all you have to do is to start noticing yourself in everything that you do. For example, at this moment, notice that you're listening to this podcast. Notice what you're doing right now at this moment. Is this you doing these things, or is this an emotion? Is this your mind, right? At this moment, you're probably sitting in a chair. Maybe you're walking. Maybe you're working out. But nonetheless, at this moment, this is you. This is the same you that has always been there. When you really stop and pause, and I would challenge you, if you're not doing something like driving, unless you're at a red light, I would tell you at this moment, just stop and pause for 10 seconds. And just notice that in this moment, this is me, this is you, this is I, this is, and you can say your name. So this is Philip. And I want you to notice that. Sometimes I even have my clients rub their fingertips together as they say that, just to give them a sense of control that this is their body and they have control. They have say over what this body, what this mind decides to do, right? And that's how you start to create that space. Another way you can create space is start to notice your thoughts the same way that you would notice elevator music whenever you get into an elevator or you're walking to a restaurant. Just sit back and just see it. Notice it with curiosity. As you're listening to this podcast, notice what thoughts have passed by your mind. Notice what you're thinking at this moment. When you get home later tonight, I would tell you to notice what thoughts are going through your mind right before you go to bed, and see them as if you're looking at, let's say, a painting on the wall or clouds in the sky. You don't have to figure them out. You don't have to try to make them go away. You don't have to try to work on them or anything like that, but just see them as what they are, which is just simply thoughts. They come and they go. And if I were to ask you to tell me a thought you had, let's say 2 weeks ago, you may be able to give me maybe one or two, but the whole list of thoughts that you've had that day, they've come and they went and they're forgotten forever. And it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing that's going to happen right now. So I want you to start to practice noticing yourself, and then also noticing your thoughts and being able to see the difference between the two. This is the first point of where happiness and peace lives within you. The second point that I want to make is that peace and happiness lives in this space, right? So this space between you and your mind, it lives in this space because this space equates to freedom. That gap between you and all the nasty things that your mind says to you, it gives you the flexibility to have a thought and then choose how you would like to respond to that thought. Okay, listen to what I'm saying here. That gap between who you are and then all the nasty things that your mind says, it gives you the flexibility to have a thought and then choose how you would like to respond. Your mind is not a police officer that's arresting you. It's not a president of the United States coming across the TV saying, hey, you have to do this, right? That's not the case, right? I'll give you another example. So I want to talk about this space, right? So let's think about this like sports, right? Let's say we're playing basketball and I'm guarding you. And if I know that every time I press you, right? So I'm like up in your face, guarding you real tight. If I know that every time I do that, you're going to go right, it's going to make it very easy for me to stop you if we're on a basketball court. But what if you could also go left? What if you had that flexibility that you can go between the legs, behind the back, spin move, right? And go left, right? It'll make it very hard for me to stop you. And as a result, guess what I have to do as a defender? I have to back up. I have to start giving you space now because you have this flexibility. It's kind of like having a handle like Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving. For some of my older heads that listen to my podcast, this is like Allen Iverson. These guys have an ability to create space. And that's what we want to do with our mind, right? You want to create this space. So by having this you're now able to have the curiosity that you need, the courage that you need to take an action whenever a thought isn't there or is there. So let's say a thought that isn't there is, I can do this, right? Let's say you're searching your mind. Maybe you're telling yourself, I can do this in terms of an affirmation, but you're not quite believing it, right? Maybe your mind is saying, man, that stuff isn't working right now. Just cut it out. If your mind is saying that this technique, this skill, this main point that I'm making, it'll give you the ability to take an action, even if that thought isn't present. But let's say the thought that is present is, you're not good enough. You're going to fail. This is going to end in tragedy. We will still want to be able to take action because, again, we do not want to see our mind as the as the police officer and us as the prisoner, if you will. So we want to start to have that space. And when that is created, just like that basketball example that I gave, it now forces the thought to back up a little bit. So now we can get creative and go and do what we want to do, even if that thought or that defender is present. So what this means for you is to become flexible with how you respond to your thoughts and your feelings. Just like I read in that first opening quote, right? Be flexible and understand what you can control and what you can't control, right? Have great understanding of that. And just like a running back, or as I mentioned, a point guard on a basketball court tries to fake out their defenders, that's what you want to do, right? And to do that, be curious and do something you've never done whenever a thought like, I can't do this comes up. Maybe you do it just a little bit. But let's say the thought of, I'm not good enough comes up. Maybe you still put yourself out there, and whether you ask for the raise, ask that girl or that guy out, or you start raising your prices, it can be so many things, okay? And then my main point number 3, when you create this space, if you really want to find peace and happiness, find a way to engage within your values when this space is created. Because here's the thing, you have two options. You can either live in your head or you can live in your values. And to live in your values, it doesn't take much, let's say, action, if you will. And as a result, I'm going to give you a challenge. Within 24 hours of listening to this podcast, so yes, look at the time, notice the day. Within 24 hours of this podcast, I want you to act in accordance. I want you to act in alignment with one of the values that you deeply, deeply have. And to do this, it doesn't take much effort, okay? I'll give you an example. Let's say I'll use a personal value. So one of my personal values when it comes to my career is hard work, okay? It's hard work. Now, when it comes to that value, there's not a thing that I need to accomplish per se, like check off and then it's done, because hard work is an ongoing value. And to be working hard, I can access that value in an instant. What that may look like is me editing this podcast, me doing this podcast. Maybe that's me setting up some emails for the week. All these things equate to working hard, right? It doesn't take long to do that. I can give you another value. One value that I have is adventure when it comes to leisure time. To do that, if I can't go anywhere, I may get adventurous by looking something up online. As a matter of fact, yesterday, I was looking up all the museums that are in DC because me and my family were planning on going to DC in the fall, right? Like that's me acting in accordance with that value. Even though I'm not doing it just yet, I can still act in accordance, in alignment with that value. So that'll be my challenge to you. Because again, when you have the option to live either in your head or in your values, if you want to find that peace, if you want to find that happiness, you need to live within those values. And to do that, you have to create enough space so now you can go left. Going left equals living in your values. Going right equals us doing the same thing that we've been doing for the past 20 or 30 years whenever this thought or this feeling or even this situation comes up. So I want to capitalize and restate these 3 points that I want to make or that I have made when it comes to creating that happiness and that peace. So point number 1, peace and happiness lives in the space between you and your mind. The more connected you are to your thoughts, the more your thoughts have control over you. The second point, peace and happiness lives in this space because this space equates to freedom. And that's where I gave you the example. If I'm guarding someone on the basketball court and they have the ability to also go left, I now have to back up and give them space. And then the third point, when you create this space, if you really want to find peace and happiness, find a way you can engage within your values once you create this space. And I want you guys to do something that's aligned with your values within 24 hours of listening to this podcast. So with that being said, guys, thank you for checking this out. This is Coach Wells, and make sure you click the link below so that you can get more information like this. And also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. All right, guys, I'll see you later.